welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. Today we're going to talk about tips and tricks and myths about commercial property auctions, right? So you will probably have seen some commercial property auctions, almost everything during the last little bit of rate rises, the last probably 3 to 6 months. We're seeing more auctions in commercial property than we ever before. Normally, when I first started in the industry, it was expressions of interest, private treaty, but then we've gone to auction format. And really, it's the vendor wanting unconditional contracts. They don't want you to do your due diligence. They want to know that you're going to buy the property regardless of where your finance is. So how do you guarantee that you're going to get a good deal when you're going to auction, right? And of course, the simple answer is to do your due diligence and line up your ducks beforehand. But really, sometimes with the campaign auction going anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks, an auction campaign, you really don't have time to line up your finance because you don't know what price you're going to get. So you can't get a valuation. So you really need to depend on getting the longest possible settlement that you need at the other end. So the number one thing I look at, if there's a property I really, really like, is to get extended settlement. So if I'm in Melbourne, then I can get 30, 60, 90 days. And I always try for my 90 days, failing that 60 days, because I know that a lease stock loan, failing everything, and that's the safeguard with commercial properties, that failing everything, lease stock loans can be done between 4 to 6 weeks. So 60-day settlement should be fine. Now, if you're in New South Wales, it's 42 days. Normally it's 30 days auction. We try to do 42 or 60 days. Very rarely do you get 90 days. Queensland, you can nominate, but most of the time it's 30 days again. And of course, we try to do 60 days, of course, for settlement. So we try to get the 60 days as much as possible to you line up the finance on the other end. But of course, you never know what your valuation is going to come in at. So one of the things that if there is a property that's fairly large and you're not sure whether you're going to be able to get the val coming in on price, because we have recently a lot of valuations that's fallen over, one of the things that you need to do is get a pre-purchase valuation. Now, pre-purchase valuation costs anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500, depending on who you use, but you're typically using the same valuers as you would if you were going through the bank. Of course, you're instructing them and not the bank, so the criteria is going to be a little bit different, but you can say to them, I'm going to want to use this potentially for the bank, but I want you to value it as if you were valuing it for the bank, and they'll look at things maybe a little bit harsher. They'll get some different comparisons for the property and give you more accurate ideas of whether you're going to be able to come up by valuation, of course, as well. But knowing that once you get the valuation at auction, if you were not the winning bidder, then of course you forfeit that as well. So that's something to know and understand as well. Now, that is lining up your finances in the back end. Of course, going into it, you've got to make sure you've got enough deposit. And make sure you've already checked with your finance broker or the bank that you can get the finance, happy with the rate, know what your terms are before you go to auction on the finance front. But as a more important thing to think about is actually due diligence. So this is where the tips and tricks comes in, right? And the myths, right? Is that people think at auction you get your best deals. Auctions actually work for the vendor more times than it does with the purchaser. So you need to make sure you don't go overbid. You got to know your numbers, and you got to know where is your stop and your ceiling, right? Because that is where most people make the mistake, is that they go in and they buy too high, or they go in and what the agent's given you is misleading. And I can tell you right now, categorically, almost all agents are going to give you a lower end amount for you to come in so that you can go and every bid against each other, go higher up. So for example, there's a property that the last auction I went to was about a month or so ago, where the agent gave me an indication between 2.6 to 2.8 million, turned up to the auction, and all of a sudden the vendor wants 3.2 million. And it's like, well, if you told me that right in the beginning, I wouldn't have attended the auction. I got our client prepared. I was prepared to buy. We tried to line up the finance at the back end. We got a verbal acceptance that was financed against the property. And we did our DD, and we know the rough valuations in the area. So we're ready to buy, and we're happy to go to even 2.95 at the time. But the vendor tried to get to 3.2, and that was only reviewed at the auction at 2.95 or 2.9. We were actually the highest bidder, and the vendor wouldn't want to sell. He didn't even meet his reserve. Now, if I knew that, then I wouldn't have gone to auction at all. It was a complete waste of time. But these are some of the things that you've got to be prepared for, is that you've got to do your due diligence. So site inspection is really important when you're buying an auction property because they try to rush the process. So most people are buying auction properties sight unseen at the moment. So for you, it's most important that you get someone you trust or someone you know, or yourself go and inspect the property. Nothing than inspecting it to feel the tenant, know the area, walk around the area, and gives you a sense of peace and calm when you go to auction because you know how much you're willing to pay for it at that time. Right? By going and sighting it gives you a level of confidence you wouldn't otherwise. So make sure you do that. If you can, pest and building, ask if they've got a pest and building previously done. The other thing is that's why the site inspection is so important, because if you can't do pest and building, there's two things you can do. You can go inspect the property. You can see for water leaks, any water damage, any issues, smell of mold. You can see the air conditioning working. You can look for cracks in the walls, roof, a ceiling area, any cracks in the concrete. You can watch the tenants, how busy they are, and talk to the tenant, and then spend some time in the area and come back when the agent's not there to do a better inspection. You can also look on Google Maps, near maps, have a look at the roof of the property, right? If you can't get a pest and building done because you don't want to spend the money, the least thing I would say is to get someone to fly a drone over the top of the building if it's a tall building. If it's not, get a ladder and go up yourself, but a drone to see it, then you get to know the condition of the roof, because roof is one of the most expensive. Roof, air conditioning, for any commercial property, small format commercial property, that is one of the most expensive. We're looking at large format commercial properties, potentially of a lift and basement and all of that structural issues underneath. So that is what to make sure you check out on the due diligence. Make sure you get your tenant ledgers, so you check out that the tenant are paying rent and they're paying rent on time. Make sure you know your outgoings. Check for spikes in outgoings is really important, because often properties going to auction, you'll find that the insurance is improperly done from previously. It's underinsured. Your insurance will spike. Get an insurance quote done properly. And following that, make sure that you check for any other capital works that may come up to the property. So that means, is there anything that is likely to be replaced? Is there awnings that needs to be done? Is there electricals that need to be raised? So check the electrical boards. Is it compliance issues with mezzanine floors? Is there fire compliance, asbestos? Check those things. So make sure you do your due diligence, and you really need to stay on the agent to make sure you get on top of that due diligence as you do it, right? So that is the tip, the most important tip for preparing for auction, is making you feel comfortable. So when you go to auction, you know what you're bidding against, you know the area, you know the property, you know what the exit strategy for the property is. So you know that you can pay, whether it's 100 or 150 or 200k above, what you're planning to do. If worst case scenario, what's the best case scenario, run your numbers. That is how you get prepared for auction. Now, one of them, do not be misled that during a auction you are going to get the property any cheaper. Auctions reflect what the market is delivering. Auctions reflect what's happening in the market. Sometimes you could get lucky and there could be 3 people that turn up to auction rather than 30 people, right? You could be the one person. There's been times we turned up in 2014 and 16 when commercial property wasn't the favorite. 1 or 2 people turn up. Yes, you could probably nab a bargain. Right now in this market, be prepared. Preparation. Make sure that you buy at market rate and make sure you buy well. But without preparation, you are going to lose out, because the vendor is hoping that with emotion and bidding, it's going to get the prices up, right? And then you're going to pay a ridiculous yield for a property in an area. It's going to take many years for you to recover. But for you, if you're prepared and you're not emotional, you run the numbers and you know your numbers and you know what you can get out of the property. So is there a rental increase coming up, rental hikes that you can create? Could you, increase the rent on certain properties? Could you swap out a tenant? Could you rent out a car space? Could you put an ATM? Anything else you need to add to the property to increase the return? Have that game plan as well. With that in mind, you can go hand in hand and without being emotional. The less emotional you are, the better you will negotiate. And yes, if you lose out on this deal, there will always be another one at auction. But at auction, be prepared that the agent's going to be using all sorts of tactics. Can you give me another 25? Can you give me another 50? Why don't you want to do this? Look at the upside. Give me the property and I'll make the property great. He's going to give you all sorts of promises that does not stand. Believe in your numbers. Believe in what you know. Stick to it. And that is the best way to win the auction. And remember that if there's always that one person that's willing to pay higher than you to get the property, you might as well let them have it. Don't be greedy. There's another property around the corner. Yes, you would have spent money. So, one of the most important things, people don't want to spend money before an auction. You've got to spend the money. If you're serious about the property, you've got to invest in it, be ready to buy. And the more serious you are, the more likely you'll get to the property. But please do not think that you are going to get an absolute bargain, because most of the time you don't. Do not think that the vendor is selling it this way because they're trying to hide something, because the thing is that they probably are told to sell this way because of two things. One, the agent thinks it's the fastest way to get rid of the property because they get their commission, and also because the agent believes that in this market, if it doesn't sell at auction, it's actually going to be worse off for the vendor. So selling at auction is the cheapest, fastest way for them, but it may not be for you, right? Because you've got competition. So really stick to doing your due diligence up front, knowing your numbers, have your finance lined up, get the maximum amount of time for settlement, and go to auction. Don't be emotional. Work through the numbers. Get clear-headed. The most of the time when the agent's trying to go at you, get more clear-headed, ground into your numbers, stay calm. Don't be emotional, stay calm. Know what you're buying, and good luck at auction. So with that in mind, if you want any tips, you want us to help you at auction, you want us to have a look at property, assess it, help you build financial freedom through commercial property, reach out to us, helentarrant.com, Unicorn Commercial Property, link below, buy my book, join us in one of our free upcoming webinars, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.